pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any additions, deletions, corrections to the proposed agenda for this evening?
No, sir.
Okay. Roll call for council.
President Schneider,
Present.
President Pro Tem Dyke, Councilmember Feldman, Councilmember Glasser,
Present.
Councilmember Kuligowski, Councilmember Powell,
Present.
Councilmember Steffler. Present.
We did get advance notice that Ed Kuligowski and Pete Feldman were not going to be able to attend this evening, so we knew that. Can we have roll call for Planning Commission?
Tedeschi,
Here.
Meek,
Here.
Zender,
Here.
Carl, Miller.
Here.
And roll call for DDA.
Rose, Miller, Feldman, Schneider, Booz.
Good, thank you. Communications, I don't think we had any for this meeting. Moving on to consent agenda, public hearing minutes. This is the public hearing for February 20th relating to the application for speculative building designation to qualify for future industrial facilities exemption certificate. Anybody have any comments, corrections, discussion regarding the public hearing of February 20th, 2024, as I described it? Not. Moving on. The regular meeting minutes for the Village Council's regular February 2024 meeting. Shut up. Page 7 of our packet on the meeting minutes, the very first line, who was talking? Oh, it was Caitlin. She also explained that council by it should be choose as opposed to chose.
Yes. Sorry.
Other than that, everything looked fine. Anybody have any further discussion regarding our minutes of our council meeting? Moving on, general fund. Downtown Development Authority Fund, Sewer Fund, Water Fund, Equipment Fund, Payroll Register Report. Entertain a motion. Agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimously approved by all council members in attendance. Now is the time for public comment for any item on our regular agenda for this evening. Is there any public comment as to regular agenda items? Being none. Regular agenda item number 1, the joint annual meeting, the RRC joint annual meeting regarding master plan. Caitlin, are you making that presentation?
I am ready.
Good. Go, please.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Caitlin Haben. I'm with Wade Trim. I'm your planning consultant. I've been through your whole process on updating our master plan. So at the last council meeting, they authorized us for the public hearing. I'm going to go over essentially tonight the master plan, what its intent is, some value associated with it, the process we've been through so far, taking some summary points of what's in the plan so far, talking about implementation as well, which each of these boards here tonight, we've, with the Planning Commission, have brainstormed things that should be in there. There's a few different discussion points to make sure that we're all in the same kind of visioning standpoint of where do we want our community to go. And then we'll talk about next steps as part of finishing the master plan project. And then hopefully we'll have some time to talk a little bit about the village branding and kind of go through just a little bit of a thought on that. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, flag it. I will stop and we will answer it. So don't hesitate to ask any questions. So one of the purposes behind your master plan is just your comprehensive plan that's long-term vision. And when I say long-term, typically a 20-year horizon. You review it then every 5 years to make sure that this is generally the direction you want your community to go into. And it's providing some general guidance or framework for where do you want your community to go. It describes where your community has been. So some historical stuff, like we'll talk about population information, we'll talk about housing, where you want to go, that's your goals and objectives in our future land use map. And then how the community is going to get there is our implementation plan portion. So with our plan, one of the big things is we're setting a vision for what we want to be. It's not just saying the day-to-day zoning decisions per se that we're making at the Planning Commission, but it can be more grand changes that we want to see as a community as well. For our plan, we do not have major grand changes. We're keeping within the same character. That was very important to a lot of our public responses. We're talking about protecting our community character, our environment, our quality of life, or improvements to those, envisioning what our placemaking looks like, the blueprint of development or redevelopment, but also collaboration between our different neighboring jurisdictions. On what everyone's doing and how that aligns together so then you get the vision that we want in the end. And making that goals, those action items that we can actually incrementally do to take there. Part of it is that if we adopt our master plan and then just put it back on the shelf, it will not do very much for us. And so the village has always in the past done a really good job of incrementally looking at the master plan and thinking, well, what do we want to focus on? What were the 5 things we wanted to do in 5 years? And let's do them or make an effort to do them. And so I hope we continue that energy to make sure that we continue not just to make a plan and then ignore it, but to have it live its value as we've already moved it forward. So part of the impact of our master plan is talking about aesthetics. It's talking about economic, and not just from a development standpoint, talking about political ramifications, social ramifications, but also then physical changes as that happens within our community as well. So in May of 2023, that's when we started the master planning process. And then essentially through July and September, we primarily worked with the Planning Commission to go over background information. So that's our housing study, that's our demographics, existing land use. September through February was really more of our visioning section of the plan, where we talked about goals and objectives. We talked about our future land use map. We had our community survey that was available from August to September. And then we had our open house recently in January. What's coming next is we're going to have our public hearing with the Planning Commission in May. Then it would be then adopted by our village council. And then hopefully it would be fully completed then in June. That's our tentative completion time. So that's a tentative timeline of where we've been and where we're going. The master plan split in a few different sections. So on the screen and in your slides, I just listed every single one. So I don't go into every single one in depth, but I do try to cherry pick very important pieces or characteristics of Elmont that we wanted to point out in each of these various different chapters, especially as we kind of go through our abbreviated discussion tonight. So the first part is our demographics section. So as you may know, our population is about 2,846. Our median age is 39. From a population trending projection, now this is based on the county level projections, but you can apply them to our specific community. We're seeing an increase in 75 plus year olds, and we're seeing a decrease in 20 to 34 year olds in our area. So it goes back to why are they not staying? That's usually a pretty desirable demographic. And then as people are aging, do they have the next step where they can continue to stay here? Or are they going to also have to find somewhere else to be? So watching those trends. Typically, the village has seen about a 6% increase over time. That may continue to generally increase. Part of that's related to your housing. So our average housing side is 2.5 almost. Typically, that's a national trend. You have less people living per household because you either have divorced smaller families, you have seniors who do not live in the same conditions, you have families that are not as large as they used to be in the day, so you need more housing to accommodate the same population because they want more individual units. So that's a trend that's happening nationwide. When you're looking at your median housing value, so that's on the screen at 186,784. That's probably middle of the road. In the report, it actually compares you to some of the surrounding jurisdictions like Romeo. Compare us to the township of Elmont, but also Emily City. So we're somewhere in the middle of the road on some of those different demographics. Same thing with household income, about 62,000. Then we have per capita income at 31,000. We're mainly a bedroom community with a lot of different people commuting out of this. One of the demographic images that are shown based on census data is that we have about 307 employees coming into our community. You have 43 that live in the community and also work in the community. And then you have 1,190 that are leaving but live here. So majority of your residents work somewhere else. So that's an interesting kind of demographic to look at, and the average commute being about 30 minutes for those individuals. The graphic on the top right is showing your different demographic changes. So a majority of your population's middle-aged at 35 through 64, then followed by about a quarter of it under 19. So you do have a decent amount of school-age individuals that have that like family-centric kind of component. The next section we'll talk about is housing. Oh, go ahead. Yep. Maybe that was an implied impairment to help show the demographic. Would you like him to be hunched over instead, or? Okay, I'll try to think a little bit more lively on that one. So looking at housing, we have about 1,163 dwelling units. 10% of our housing units are rentals. I did include some of the comparative data when we look at median housing income. So as you can see there, we're at the very top. That's more listed just for our ease, is the 62,000. In the township, it's closer to 80. Emily City is significantly lower at 41. Village of Romeo is comparable at 62 as well. And then Lapeer County as a whole is 71. So we're kind of somewhere in the middle there, I guess, if you're looking at from a county average. When we look at the median house value, so we are at that's at the top diagram, that 143,000 or 174,800, which is above Emily City by a significant amount, is under the township average, and then is under the Village of Romeo from that standpoint. And then also just shy of the county. When we look at the number of units as far as bedrooms within our dwelling units, about 3% are one bedrooms. Majority, 78%, is 2 to 3 bedrooms, and then about 18% is 4 bedrooms or more. So majority of our housing is more accommodating multiple larger families typically. When we look at our rental situation, that's on the far right diagram. So we have 886 for the gross monthly rent. If you look at the township, they're a bit higher. Lower is Emily City, and then Village of Romeo is also lower as a comparable. And then Lapeer County as an average is lower. So it is potentially more of a burden. And so the diagram below that shows the mortgage affordability and renter affordability. The rule of thumb is always about a third of your income should go towards housing. And so if you are in that green or orange or yellow kind of category, you're probably okay. You're doing okay from a fiscal standpoint. But if you're 40% or more of your household income is going towards housing, you have more house than you can afford. And so from a mortgage standpoint, we're doing really well with maybe 10%. That's different people. But when you go to renter affordability, that's 60%. So there is that's about 40% of the renters have an affordability issue. And so that is affordability concern long term. We talk about natural features. So we are part of the Clean River Watershed. So their logo is there. We have a few different drains within the village setting. And then what we also included in our master plan update is the importance of trees. So making sure that that's something that is a value that we want to make sure is the justification in a zoning sense why we're kind of continuing to require trees and have trees. Looking at existing land use, this is not looking at zoning, it's looking at what is here now. Specifically, 44% of our land use is single family. Now this diagram or the map and the basis of the data is splitting parcels. So the back portions where you see it hatched on some of those different yellow components, that's because there's still some remaining large single family homes that have like maybe the front portion but several acres behind it that are undeveloped. And so just clarification